Okay, so we are in week 8 of the names of God, and today is going to be a very quick lesson. However, I think that it is important for us to continue through. So this week is Yahweh Rapha, and this was the first time I had heard it said like that because typically we would hear Jehovah Rapha, but in all things, we are learning new ways to acknowledge God so that in our time of need, we know to whom we are speaking to and to the ways in which we are acknowledging God. And so this is one of the names in which he has given to himself. Um, and Yahweh Rapha is known as the Lord who heals. And when I was reading this, one thing that I thought was very important for us to acknowledge is a lot of times when we think about healing, we think about physical sickness, we think about ailments, or we think about our body, like the physical part of us. But what we have to realize and also acknowledge is that when we are asking for Yahweh Rapha, Jehovah Rapha, the Lord that heals, we are talking about more than our physical. For some people, it could be their mental. For some people, it could be their spiritual. For some people, it can be different aspects outside of the physical. So when we read about this and when this name is introduced, it comes in Exodus 15, and the Israelites have just come out of like the great miracles in history where the Red Sea has been parted and God has delivered them and they're celebrating. And Miriam is dancing, and Miriam is Aaron and Moses' sister. So Miriam, yes, healing relationships. Thank you, Tawana. Miriam is the one who actually put Moses in the basket in like, no, his mother did it, but Miriam is the one who followed him. And then when Pharaoh's sister came out, she's the one who went and said, "Hey, here's his baby. Do you want me to go get a Hebrew woman to come and nurse him?" And she went and got his mother. So Miriam at this time is has crossed the Red Sea, is with the rest of the Israelites as they're going into their promised land, and she's there and she's dancing. Um, Through this time, what happens is 3 days into this, after all of these great, take your daddy his phone. After all of these great, wonderful things have happened, they have just seen God provide for them. They have just seen God swallow up the Egyptians in the Red Sea. They have just seen Pharaoh and his army drown. They start complaining. Like, y'all couldn't even wait a full week. Like 72 hours later, they're in the wilderness and they have no water. And when they finally find water, it's bitter and they are complaining. And so I'm gonna pause right there because you hit your head. Okay, go take that to daddy, please. Um, because that's just like how life is for us. Like we can have these mountaintop moments, and right after we find ourselves in a situation and it's like that doesn't match what God just did. So he just did this wonderful thing for them. And then now 3 days later, it's not matching. Like the math don't math. How are we out here in the wilderness with no water? And then we find water and it's bitter. And so we have to look like a lot of times we judge the Israelites, but sometimes for us, we are the Israelites. Like we could have this high moment in the morning, and by sundown, somebody done pissed you off something that happened, and you in a whole different mindset, and you act like what happened this morning didn't happen. And so again, it's easy to judge them, but a lot of times we are like them. So in verse 33, it says they came to Mara, but they did not drink the water because it was bitter. And if you know in the story of Ruth, when Naomi goes back to her hometown, she calls herself Mara, which is bitter. And instead of crying out to God as they had been doing and as they had seen Moses do, instead of acknowledging God, instead of going to God for his wisdom, his presence, for his guidance, they start complaining. They immediately start the complaining cycle. And it says, but Moses did something different, and Moses cried out to the Lord. And when God showed him a piece of wood, he said, throw it into the water, and the bitter water became sweet. And so this just shows the difference between the complaining that the Israelites were doing and the calling out to God that Moses did, because God answered Moses, but he didn't answer the complaining of the Israelites. Like, y'all can complain all day, but you're not talking to me. And so as soon as Moses has a conversation with God, God tells him what to do. And it's important also to acknowledge that when God tells us to do something, that we do it. Because throwing a piece of wood into water sounds crazy. It don't sound like it makes sense. It doesn't sound like what is that going to do? But because Moses feared God and had obedience to him, he did what he told him to do, and they were able to have sweet water because of his obedience. And this is the pattern of what has happened with the Israelites is instead of going to God, their first notion is always to start complaining. Um, and then in verse 26 is when he comes and he says, I am the Lord who heals you. So he acknowledges that to them. And so we don't want to miss that God introduces himself as a healer, not when they were sick, but when they were in need. And he introduces to himself at a time where they were experiencing something bitter. So it wasn't a physical ailment that they were having, it was more so like a mental breakdown. So when he says, I am Yahweh Rapha, he's not just saying that I heal bodies, which is what we talked about. He's saying I restore, I repair, and I make whole. And this means your broken heart, your disappointment, trauma, like Tawana was saying, your relationships, your silent struggles, that he is a God that heals more than our physical ailments. And we have to acknowledge him as that when it happens. So when you have these moments of needing things to be healed, needing things to be repaired, God, Yahweh Rapha, Jehovah Rapha is the one that you can call on. Let me look at my notes really quickly, making sure I don't miss something. Okay. Oh, and the people complained. They're complaining again. Um, is shifting focus of who God is into what we feel, because how we feel can always, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, when we feel certain things and we have certain ways of thinking about things, but we forget the God who is bigger than what we feel. And we try to take on these human or these godlike problems or these godlike situations with human ability. And that's not what we are supposed to do. God is God because he is the one who can handle what is happening to us. And we have to introduce him back into the situation. Like Moses and the people could not change the situation with the water because that's beyond what their human ability was able to do. But Moses knew to go to God, the one who was able to change it, and he does it. Moses didn't try to fix the situation himself. Moses said, God, we're in the situation. What is it that what are we supposed to do? You brought us out here. What are we going to do with this water situation? He went to the God who he knew can change the situation because he knew that it wasn't a situation that he can change himself. And so we have to do that in our situations and is understand that these human bodies that we have, these human abilities that we have are not capable of handling God-sized problems. Um, and then his healing is not always what we expect. So we have to be honest about how we're feeling and what we're experiencing so that we can get the honest response from God. And healing is connected to the obedience. Because if God says, put it back. Yes, thank you. God says if you're listening, he's going to respond. He's going to talk to you. But the healing isn't just something that God does to you, it's something that he does within you. Um, put that back, please. And then we go on after they have this experience, they go on, they leave Mara, the bitter place, and they go on and they have these springs of water, they have these palm trees, all these things that happen. So I'm going to leave it there and allow us to have some conversation.